2025 is a year that asks and demands more of us. The world feels unsettled, the old order no longer certain, the new one not yet defined.
Some of the sounds and sights, if you're watching this podcast, from that mega meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, in Kuala Lumpur, a summit that US President Donald Trump attended along with the leaders of Japan, South Korea, and the Premier of China. The Prime Ministers and Presidents from a wide range of nations, from Australia to Canada and Brazil to South Africa, were also there. ASEAN welcomed its newest member, Timor-Leste, and the group touched on a number of issues with trade and economic matters at the fore. So let's get you the highlights of the ASEAN talks in the Malaysian capital. Senior correspondents from CNA, Leong and Melissa Goh have spent the last 4 dizzying days on the ground, and they join me on the podcast today. This summit, Mel, I want to start with you. This summit somehow feels very different. There were more leaders. I know we have a peace agreement, we have 4 trade agreements, we have a new member. Yes, people say it was because of Trump, but I'm not totally convinced. I can't help but feel it would have been very different if not for this man.
We share a lot of things in common. I was in prison, but he almost got there.
So Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, Mel, has been tireless as ASEAN chair. I'm wondering if you feel the same as me. Would it have been the same if someone else was in charge? And how much credit should Anwar get?
Arnold, you're absolutely right. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim plays a pivotal role in making it happen, in bringing US President Donald Trump here to Malaysia. It's quite a coup, some may said. Now, remember Malaysia earlier this year, as chair of ASEAN, hosted the ASEAN-China Summit, the ASEAN-China GCC Summit. And to a certain extent, was seen by a lot of people leaning too close to China, tilting too close to China. Now, Prime Minister Anwar, since the beginning of the year, has been working on the ASEAN-US Summit, trying to bring one here during Malaysia's chairmanship. Now, he's been working very hard, but he's also advocating ASEAN member countries to be BRIC members, to be part of BRICS. Now, and also Malaysia stands as a staunch supporter of Palestinian cause and also the anti-Israeli stance. Some were calling, pro-Hamas, I would say. It makes it very difficult. But an opportunity arose in July following the border conflicts between Thailand and Cambodia. Lots of work on the ground making this happen. President Trump wants to champion this, the ceasefire, and that was co-organized. Within days after the conflict, we see both leaders, the Prime Minister of Cambodia and Prime Minister of Thailand here in Putrajaya at the administrative capital, sitting down, and of course with the US ambassador on one side and Chinese ambassador on the others, observing this ceasefire to put in place. Now, all these were happening in record speed, and President Trump finally, fulfilled what he promised Mr. Anwar and showed up at the ASEAN Summit here in Kuala Lumpur.
So why kid? I'm wondering, you talk to your contacts all the time. What are other ASEAN members saying about the chairmanship of Malaysia and Anwar Ibrahim?
Well, one of the highlights, of course, is actually not an ASEAN Summit event per se. It is a sideline event, which is the signing of the Thai-Cambodia peace deal. Look, for ASEAN, any project that brings peace to the region, ASEAN will welcome. But of course, there are some concerns, right? Because as Mel had said in one of the commentaries in the last few days, when Mr. Trump was here, it was very transactional. Like, there were individual countries trying to make deals with Washington, and in a way that was the tone. But overall, the messaging that Mr. Donald Trump's presence in ASEAN is that there is renewed commitment to the region's peace. Mr. Trump himself said he had stopped 8 wars in 8 months. That's 1 month a war, and in a way, it sort of anchors him to the region more strongly, because now he's in a way, he has a project, a peace project here. And so this can be seen as US renewal of interest in peace in the region, but it can also be seen as a message to China that despite China's ASEAN neighborhood diplomacy, Washington is now featuring more prominently in the region. In any case, like I said, any project that brings peace to the region, that gives prosperity and stability, is always welcomed by ASEAN members and ASEAN as a whole.
So Mel, is there anything, Anwar Ibrahim would be disappointed about? I mean, as chair, he was seeking trade and economic stability. He was looking for balanced ties, given the tensions between Washington and Beijing. He was looking for ASEAN centrality as well. So did he achieve all of that, or does he have some unfinished business?
Well, for starters, he will be very disappointed if President Trump, were to decide not to come. Given the series of protests we are seeing on the ground leading up to the ASEAN Summit, there are Malaysians who felt strongly that President Trump shouldn't be here at all because they see him as responsible for continuing the conflict in Gaza, for perpetuating the suffering of the Palestinian people, and shouldn't be here sharing the same stage with ASEAN. But having said that, I think Prime Minister Anwar knows that the strategic economic interests comes first for ASEAN, not just for Malaysia, for ASEAN as a whole, while facing the stripping US tariffs. At the same time, there are domestic concerns, but that will have to be, the second concern for him right now. But as far as balancing both, that he shared half an hour in the Beast, taking the ride from the airport, from the tarmac right to the KL Convention Center here, the summit. At the same time, a lot of analysts are saying that, Prime Minister Anwar has done well in raising the profile for ASEAN, for the bloc, and shining a spotlight on this region as a safe haven, that a neutral ground that can bring superpowers here to discuss. Because on the sideline, we are also seeing Chinese negotiators and US top negotiators coming up a framework finally to be presented to President Xi and also President Trump for them to decide when they meet on the sideline of the APEC summit in Korea.
Well, Kit, President Trump said all the right things in KL, particularly that the US is with Southeast Asia 100% and will be a strong partner and a friend for many generations. I'm wondering, do all ASEAN members believe him? I mean, yes, he did get that peace agreement signed, then he had those trade agreements, but there were only 4 countries, right? 4 countries, which Sharon Xia from the ICS Yusof Ishak Institute says reflects Trump's ultimate goals.
Yeah, the US is in a critical race for minerals to support its industries, and I think this is a very large component of what it means to President Trump to make America great again. So the countries that possess deposits, who have been doing prospecting or who have been doing their geological studies will definitely be on top of the agenda for this particular sector. But there are other countries, as you mentioned, who have other means of pushing their strategic value. And I think for those countries, you just have to work a lot harder to make sure that they can contribute to, maintaining that ethos of making America great again.
So I just want to get to this, the trade deals in particular, right? I mean, I'm wondering, because only 4 countries managed to get these agreements, how about the rest of ASEAN? I mean, are they, do they believe President Trump, for example? Do they feel left out? What's the sense and what's the reaction from other countries who don't really, I mean, I guess you could call them the losers, but the winners, as Sharon Xia was saying, are these 4 countries?
Yeah, I think when it comes to trade negotiations, it has never been in Mr. Donald Trump's style to negotiate between Washington and ASEAN as a bloc. He prefers bilateral, and ASEAN member states know this, but it also knows that it can't do nothing. It has to beef up its own efforts. So you look at how ASEAN has been trying to look within the bloc to see how it can trade better within ASEAN. There's this upgrade of ATIGA, which stands for ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement. That has been upgraded. What really this means is that when you trade within the bloc, you have lower tariffs and it makes it easier for goods to flow here and there. And you know that ASEAN will have to do more. So there's this free trade agreement with China that there's now, as of now, being signed. At the time this podcast is being aired, it would have been signed. And this means on the big picture, more structured way of dealing with one another when it comes to trade, and most importantly, it's aimed at being mutually beneficial. What this means for you and me, or Mel even, when we look to our phone to make an order from overseas, our parcels get delivered to our doorstep even faster. That's because the pact is aimed at making goods flow more freely. We are talking about this in the backdrop of Washington's tariffs, which makes many people very jittery. So we are really keeping a close watch on whether talks between China and US can give us messages of assurance and stability for the world and the region.
So far Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, as well as Vietnam signed the deal on the reciprocal tariffs with President Trump. Now this has set the template, so to speak, for the other ASEAN member countries to do so. Now, as to whether he will go easy on ASEAN countries, President Trump said, no, that was what he said during the plenary, and he said, but, he wants to be friendly, yeah, and these countries have done it, and for Malaysia, the trade minister said that, actually, we got a slightly better deal now with more goods, more access to a U.S. market with the much reduced tariff rates. Mr. Trump is bent on using tariffs as a tool, a blunt tool to get what he wants. Then, the rest of the country will have to think about their own personal interests. Mm-hmm. Everything is transactional. Yeah. Every country is for themselves. But at the ASEAN platform, as soon as President Trump left Malaysia, back on talking about rules-based, multilateral trading system, calling for free and open trade, fair transparency, upholding principle multilateralism. That is still the mainstay for ASEAN, for RCEP, and they continue to make new alliances with EU, with many blocs in BRICS. South Africa and Brazilian president, they are here. It shows how important it is for South-South cooperation for ASEAN to take center stage.
I want to talk about the Thai-Cambodia peace deal. You briefly mentioned this earlier. It goes by many names, we know that. But you have pointed out, their statements, the leaders' statements, the leader of Thailand, the leader of Cambodia statements show a very different approach. So here are the telling bits. The Thai Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul, followed by Cambodia's Hun Manet.
Thailand stands for peace. This declaration reflects our will to resolve differences peacefully, in full respect of sovereignty and territorial integrity.
We look forward to continued support and contribution of international communities and partners to fruitful realizations of the joint declarations.
So the key words, for Anutin here being in full respect of sovereignty and territorial integrity, and for Manet it was the contributions of the international community and partners to ensure the fruitful realization of the joint declaration. So tell us, why are they so telling?
They are very keen to bring peace back to the country and to the people, and to make sure that this deal does not compromise on sovereignty and territory. But that's where the similarities end. It's very fundamentally different from the way they made their speeches. You heard earlier from Mr. Hun Manet, he used the word international community. And when Mr. Anutin was addressing both Mr. Anwar and Mr. Donald Trump, he made it very clear that when he was talking to Mr. Anwar, he used his title as ASEAN Chair to boost ASEAN unity. And when talking to Mr. Donald Trump, he had thanked him for his, and I quote, personal dedication to want to bring peace to the country. And this is very in line with Thailand's position. Thailand's position when it comes to the Thai border-Cambodia dispute is bilateral. Cambodia, on the other hand, wants to internationalize it. So it's brought the issue to the International Court of Justice, saying that this is a legal path and it's diplomacy in action. In fact, I heard from my sources that the Thais had been quite unwilling to sign the peace deal within the KLCC because it doesn't want to make it look as if it's an international event. It wants to be really on the sidelines. But there were things that happened. As we know, Thai Queen Mother passed away, and as a result, there had to be some last-minute changing of your timing and all that. And I will also say that this also shows the diplomatic efforts behind it, because Thailand had requested for change in the signing so that Mr. Anutin can, after signing, go back to Thailand to attend the funeral procession. And Cambodia said yes immediately. The US took a little while longer because the agenda of Mr. Donald Trump was just way too packed. But in the end, Mr. Donald Trump himself said that when he is in KL, he will sign it immediately. And so it shows a lot of political and diplomatic goodwill from this activity.
Yeah, I mean, Waikik has been on the ground at borders between Cambodia and Thailand covering the stories, and things could go wrong any time. At first we were told that this is an expanded ceasefire agreement, and suddenly it became a Kuala Lumpur peace accord. There is a difference between a ceasefire and a peace agreement. Peace agreement takes time, and to iron it out, because President Trump, to get him to be here, because he wanted it signed on the table, to rush it out for him to sign, that is a compromise on all sides to make it happen.
Despite some of the differences over the approach from Thailand and Cambodia, I want to know, if Anwar Ibrahim, we know he played a role in brokering the talks, between and reaching this peace agreement, peace deal, whatever you want to call it. I'm wondering, whether, he still feels he can be useful, or whether the entire process leading up to the signing will be useful in dealing with future flashpoints within ASEAN?
I think so. I mean, it's interesting that this could be a template. How important it is when there's a flare-up, a conflict, to really nip it in the bud. And, with Prime Minister Anwar calling both its counterpart in Thailand and Cambodia, say, what's going on, Because we already have too many destabilizing forces around. ASEAN cannot have another, a flare-up among member countries. Everyone to stick together, everyone in the same boat. So action, you can see action on the ground quickly put together in 5 days. They were meeting already in Putrajaya to talk about a ceasefire, and then now a peace deal was signed. This is a template, but just how far will it go, or just a one-off? But it is a precedent set as far as ASEAN is concerned to resolving this. Of course, you will have disagreement, you will have conflicts, but it's how you deal with it, how mature you are, and that is what the world is looking at, how ASEAN resolve its problem.
Okay, and there are still disputes within the bloc. I mean, no resolution to the Myanmar crisis. The Code of Conduct for the South China Sea is still not signed, and very often, I've covered summits on and off in the past, and you too have covered it far more often. But, the common reaction is we throw our hands up in frustration. So let me start with the COC and what Simon Tay from the Singapore Institute of International Affairs says about it.
And sometimes there's confusion as to whether the Code of Conduct is meant to settle the claims. It's not. So it's just meant to settle some of what you do when you meet each other, what not to further exacerbate the problem. I would say that China should and ASEAN should progress this, because, again, this is where the American presence can be useful. It can be a signal that if you guys can't come to a decision, can't come to some form of dialogue and process to keep peace, America might try to impose.
And Prof. Tay also said something about Trump. He doesn't have a magic wand, Mel and Waikik. He can't show up and solve, deep-rooted problems in 24 hours. So I'm wondering, the COC we know has a 2026 agreement deadline. Myanmar's was really needed yesterday. Are they still, going to get it done? I mean, are there indications also whether the US might get involved? Where are we?
Well, as far as Malaysia, as ASEAN chair this year, they managed to push towards substantive conclusion of the Code of Conduct. The heavy lifting, I guess, the last push will have to fall under the next chair, which is the Philippines court. Now, it's something that high on the priority of Philippines list as to how far this can happen. I mean, this governed conduct in the South China Sea within ASEAN and China to prevent flare-ups at sea. So countries like Japan, Well, newly elected Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi was here, and he has mentioned about Japan's concern over peace and stability in the South China and freedom of navigation and so on. And he talked about coercive activities and rising militarization of South China Sea as well. So Japan wants to play an important role, and he's been helping Southeast Asian countries in beefing up their enforcement, sending coast guards, helping in capacity building. Malaysia is a beneficiary of that.
And of course, many are expecting the Philippines as next ASEAN chair to shine the spotlight on South China Sea because there are real concerns on those disputed waters. But other ASEAN members will also want to perhaps remind the Philippines that there are also other maritime concerns that the other members share. For instance, Taiwan Strait, for example, we don't want things to flare up there. Closer to our part of the world, Strait of Malacca, we've got piracy issues. So these things need to be balanced very, very carefully.
And where are we with Myanmar, Waikit? We know elections are expected the end of December. Lots of skepticism, everywhere around the world about it. And listen to what the UN chief said to CNA in an exclusive interview.
Is there anyone that believes that there will be free and fair elections in Myanmar? It is quite obvious that in the present situation of conflict and taking into account the records of human rights of the military junta, it is obvious that the conditions for free and fair elections are not there. And elections might be part of the problem instead of being part of the solution.
So where are we exactly? I mean, even the UN chief is a little bit skeptical about it. He thinks needs more to be done. What exactly is being done, Waikit?
Well, what stood out for me this year is how ASEAN Chair Malaysia handled the Myanmar crisis. He's taking a very mixed signal approach. On the one hand, he makes sure ASEAN's firm stance against the junta is present using the 5-point consensus. Yet, as ASEAN Chair, he has showed friendliness to the military, to particularly Army Chief Min Aung Hlaing. He had on various occasions talked about the junta having shifted position on a positive note. He had also commended Army Chief Min Aung Hlaing for being cooperative and engaging. He had also said that in the last year, violence had substantially been reduced. Now, many people may disagree with Mr. Anwar Ibrahim, but his framing of Myanmar is interesting because it is a stick and carrot approach. And the way I see it, it is to easily hand over this framing to the Philippines so that the Philippines can decide for itself how it wants to use this carrot and stick approach, whether it wants to balance it or press on for carrot approach or press on for stick approach. Because when the Philippines takes over ASEAN chair, that would have been a new era, so to speak, for Myanmar because elections are planned for December 28.
Okay.
And when Philippines takes on the ASEAN chair, it is going to have to navigate very carefully how to discuss things with a post-election Myanmar. But this much we know. Regardless of the polls, the decision by ASEAN leaders is that Min Aung Hlaing or its junta-appointed foreign minister will not be able to come to the ASEAN Summit, and it won't be able to chair ASEAN until a further decision is made.
This is an ASEAN problem and should be resolved by ASEAN. And I asked the US because Secretary of State Marco Rubio wasn't here attending the East Asia Summit. It was represented by the Assistant Secretary of State in charge of East Asian policy affairs, and whether US will go further than that. And after resolving, Myanmar and Thailand and Cambodia conflict, will it go further and bring peace to Myanmar once and for all? Release pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi? The answer is no, not at this point in time. Myanmar is a different ballgame altogether.
Right.
It's gone on for so long.
Okay.
It's 4 years now, the military junta government.
So the chair, Waikit, has been handed over to the Philippines. I mean, it won't start work officially till 1st of January next year. But I'm wondering, will it inherit a bloc, an alliance, if you want to call it that, that's in a good place? Or, will Manila feel that, it's going to be a very high bar? And do you think Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is going to maintain what Anwar Ibrahim is doing? Or do you get a sense that he's going to try something else?
Well, I think the issues facing ASEAN will always be there, and these are very pressing issues which the region, which ASEAN must address because it is for the safety and stability of everyone in the region. And ASEAN's position, regardless of what it is always consistent. It's consensus-based, it doesn't want to choose sides, and that one won't change. Of course, when we look at Malaysia's chairmanship, it is very personality-driven. I mean, who can forget the visuals of Donald Trump? You were there. And I've
the Trump dance and waving the flag.
Exactly.
He was in his element, but Malaysia certainly has set the bar very high for Philippines, the next chair, to actually, But having said that, President Trump, during his first presidency, actually, first appearance was in Manila, in 2017, attending that was the first ASEAN Summit. And Malaysia is the second ASEAN Summit in his second term in office. Now, whether he will return to Manila again, it remains to be seen. But he has called out, some of the countries, Southeast Asia, ASEAN is home to many of U.S. strongest allies and friends. So he may just return.
Melissa and Waikit, we will leave it there. Thank you so much, for talking to us on the podcast today. And thank you for listening to this ASEAN Summit edition of the CNA Correspondent podcast. As always, you can catch reports from all our correspondents on CNA's YouTube channel and CNA.Asia. The TV episodes of CNA Correspondent air every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. The team behind this episode consists of Clara Ong, Tiffany Ang, Junaini Johari, Nat Fetalvaro, and Ho Pei Ning. It was edited by Samantha Ho. I'm Arnold Gay. See you next time.